Great. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Emily Reitz. I am the Director of Technology for the National States Geographic Information Council, or NSGIC. If you are unfamiliar with our organization, NSGIC exists to advance effective national coordination of geospatial information by supporting state-level cooperation. We serve as a national forum for the development of capable and future-oriented geospatial leadership. If you'd like more information on how to get involved with us, please visit our website, nsgic.org, nsgic.org. Just a couple of reminders for the call today. All attendees have been muted upon entrance, and there will be time for Q&A, I believe. But if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box throughout the presentation. And a recorded version of this webinar, along with the presentation slides, will be made available afterwards in the NSGIC knowledge base. And with that, I will turn it over to Adam Mars to introduce the presenters. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, everyone. Super happy to be here, state of South Carolina, being able to present with respect to our broadband initiative. I have two of my colleagues joining us today that are going to be, I'm going to hand the reins over to them here in just a second. Michael Hertzberger is the director of South Carolina's Broadband Office under the Office of Regulatory Staff. Michael has over 19 years of working with state, local, and federal governments across the mid-Atlantic and southern regions of the U.S., fostering creative solutions to support environmental and infrastructure-based challenges. Michael has a bachelor's degree from Towson University. Back in 2005, he majored in geography and environmental planning with a minor in GIS. He's an accredited floodplain manager, and he's also a GISP. James Tanis and I have been working together for a multitude of years, and he works also with the Office of Broadband under the regulatory staff. James has over 18 years of experience working with state, local, and federal government, focusing mostly on healthcare, census, and broadband side of the GIS house. James also has a bachelor's in science with statistics and an MS with mathematical geography from the University of South Carolina. Gentlemen, take it away.
All right, thanks, Adam. And I guess before we start the slide deck, I do just want to give a shout out to Adam and his team for their leadership through the Geographic Information Council here in South Carolina. We're excited to be presenting to you guys. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. All right, can everyone see the slide deck?
Yes, sir.
All right, great. So again, my name is Mike Hertzberger. I'm actually the Deputy Director. Thanks for the boost there, Adam, but Deputy Director for the South Carolina Broadband Office. And I have with me my colleague, Mr. James Tanis, our Senior Data Scientist. Say hey, James.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, I guess.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and just jump right in. Our goal here today is to provide an introduction to broadband and its implications on geospatial. We're going to go macro level at first, talk about what's happening with broadband. There's a lot going on. Then we're going to take a deep dive and get into specifically what the South Carolina Broadband Office is up to. We'll give you a general overview. We're going to talk about the implications of GIS, how we're using it in just about every aspect of our workflow. And then we're going to get into some Q&A. So let's go ahead and get started. So step one for us is really making sure that everyone understands broadband equals high-speed internet, right? I think all of us hopefully on this call knows this, but it's a big so what. Using plain English tends to go real far with just trying to explain how we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars. And of course, if you have broadband, it allows you to do all of these things simultaneously that you see in this graphic, right? For myself, my wife works from home. Granny's there with us. The TV's never off, and she's always on web calls. And we could do all those things in addition to, streaming movies, what have you, right there simultaneously, which is a great thing and allows us to be able to have a better quality of life, really. Otherwise, she couldn't work from home. So I'm sure there's a lot of us that sit in that boat, and broadband is what makes that possible. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we characterize broadband, and really it's three main buckets, and you see them over here on the left-hand side of your screen. You start with access, then it gets to adoption, and then it goes to use. So access is literally the physical infrastructure, and whether or not it's in the ground or on the pole and accessible to your home or your business. Adoption is really where we get into that tipping point where am I willing to spend the money month to month to have a plan to be able to utilize that access, right? And a lot of that is predicated on use. Our focus, and by the way, I like to think of this as a three-legged stool. You really need all three, right? What good is it to have access if you can't afford it? And if you can't afford it, that tends to be an adoption issue. And of course, if you're not willing to adopt it, well, you're not going to use it. So some of the value add that you get in that little cloud icon that you see here diminishes quickly, right? And that's a big deal, right? Having broadband at home means it's available to you, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And without it, you're limited. You're limited in what you can do, and we all know all about that, having gone through the pandemic. And honestly, if there was one good thing about the pandemic, if there was a silver lining, I think it's this. The American Rescue Plan Act, specifically, these are funds that were kicked off specifically because of the coronavirus. $350 billion went out to all states and U.S. territories. And then in addition to the state and local fiscal recovery funds, again, those dollars went to tribes, counties, states. You also have the Capital Project Fund, which is another $10 billion that came out as a result of the coronavirus. And a lot of these funds went to things like improving infrastructure. Specifically, that was what these funds were earmarked for. Different states use these funds for different things. Here in South Carolina, we spent about $1 billion through DOT, focused on transportation. Rural Infrastructure Authority, they received a little over $1 billion as well. Their focus was on improving water and wastewater networks in local rural communities. And of course, we also had a lot of money get pushed towards broadband deployment specifically. It's about $400 million here in South Carolina. So right after this hits and everybody starts running, we get the FCC National Broadband Map that gets released by the Federal Communication Commission, right? So ARPA is specific to the US Treasury. The FCC is responsible for actually tracking the crazy, if you will, right? So we've got what we call broadband serviceable locations, point locations across the nation, and we can ultimately determine the status or the disposition of broadband availability at any point on the map. And this is actually really powerful. I got to give FCC a lot of kudos here for putting this out there and making it accessible in the public domain. You can do a lot with this application. This also negates the need for any specific state to have to create this, right? It's already out there. Really, you just got to link to it and bring some visibility around this for consumers. The reason you really want to do that is because consumers can actually go in and challenge the dots on the map, right? So let's say, for example, the way this data all feeds in here is an internet service provider has to submit twice a year to the FCC where they can and cannot provide service, really where they can't provide service. And that data goes through a series of algorithms and ultimately gets published twice a year on this map. And any consumer can challenge whatever the map says. And in fact, what you see right here is I challenged my own address. The provider I had, I really wanted to go and find another one. And sure enough, there was another provider. I go to the provider's website, type in my address. Sorry, we can't provide you service. So I filed a challenge through the FCC. I explained that, the reality is, this provider cannot provide service to my home. And well, sure enough, in a matter of like 2 or 3 days, they changed it, right? So that challenge was sustained, and ultimately the provider had to change what it was they had reported to the FCC. So this is actually really powerful and useful, and certainly want to just give a kudos again to FCC for putting this out there. So in more recent news, we have the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act. This cut loose another $42 billion, very specifically now related to broadband deployment. And this touches all 50 states and US territories. Every state has a broadband shop, and every one of them are running to try to get in compliance with what is required of BEAD. And this includes things like an initial proposal, how you're going to spend the money, how you're going to make sure that you connect every single home and business within your state or your jurisdiction. So lots of money that is out there right now that's creating a lot of buzz. And really, we need to get this done, right? It's the age-old lesson that the haves already have it and the have-nots don't. So this is really about internet for all, this particular program, and we're excited about moving forward with this. So why does geospatial, or the where, if you will, matter? It's really big in broadband land, notwithstanding the fact that all of these internet service providers have to report back, at a broadband serviceable location level, at a house structure level, back to the federal government. All of that data needs to be modeled and synthesized in such a way where you filter out the areas that are either unserved or underserved. And these are the basis with which you determine what your eligibility map may look like for whatever grant round you could be running as it would pertain to broadband deployment. The FCC data is really the primary driver of any of the modeling that these states are doing. And really, it's quite simple. You don't want to overbuild an existing provider, right? Funds are scarce, believe it or not, even though you see a big number there, the cost to design, permit, and build isn't cheap. And with everyone doing this all at the same time, it's really put, basically just a little bit of a pressure cooker, if you will, trying to get this out of the door, get funds secured and do it in such a way where you don't end up overbuilding an area that's already has access, already has service. So it really is a balancing act. And of course, we then have to track this over the course of time. Our typical builds right now under the current programs that we've administered over the last 2.5 years, they've been about a 2-year period of performance. And tracking that over time has been quite challenging because the data continues to change. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. The other thing here is just being able to verify that what an ISP contractually obligated themselves to do under a grant, under our program, they in fact delivered on. And that really has a spatial component to it. One of the things that you have to deal with, and we're all anticipating, is not if, but when the auditors come to say, okay, let's see where you spent the money. The age-old question of, well, how do you know they did the work is going to come into play. And we've developed some really basic processes to be able to capture that in a meaningful way that's cost effective and gives us a degree of confidence before we go, stroke a check for tens of millions of dollars. So a little bit about our office here within the South Carolina Broadband Office. We're relatively new. We've only been around since July 2021. Our main focus within this office is really, it's about access. It's about deploying these funds. And to date, we're close to just shy of about $400 million that we've moved under 4 grant programs in the last 2.5 years. So we've been busy. We have a Broadband Advisory Council. We're constantly, modeling and mapping the state. Our reason for being, though, is really about, administering these grant programs. And, quickly on the money side for South Carolina, it's a little over $1 billion that has been earmarked for broadband deployment. And we are kind of smack dab in the middle of all of this right now. And you can obviously see we do have some state funds that got put toward broadband deployment right in the middle of the pandemic. But by and large, the ARPA, SLFRF, and CPF grant programs, as well as BEAD, that's another $551 million here in South Carolina. That number is going to be different for every state. That just happened to be our number based on the calculus that the federal government did. And again, we've been just super busy, rocking and rolling, trying to get this done. Lots of strings attached to this money, as I'm sure you can imagine, and the ability to track it down at a structured level is critical. And of course, let's not forget the FCC data, that reporting data, it changes every 6 months. So as you start to track progress, the denominator continues to change. BSLs come on, BSLs go away, broadband serviceable locations. And it becomes quite challenging for our senior data scientists to manage that crazy in a way that's meaningful and allows us to mark progress over time. So if you wanted to know anything about our grant program specifically, you would go to the Office of Regulatory Staff website. We've got all of our state investments there listed out, things like our guidelines and applications, template grant agreements, exhibits, all of that lives on the official state website. But if you wanted to tiptoe into the geospatial world, you would go to our hub site, which is located at scdigitaldrive.org. And we've got all kinds of wonderful tools and widgets on that website. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in some future slides, but plenty of web viewers, things like that, map books, investment maps. You can run a speed test from the hub site, no biggie there. Dashboards, we've been busy. We started out really cranking out a lot of these tools and resources without really recognizing the amount of time it was going to be to actually administer these programs and then have to update, right, everything we're doing because everything is just in a constant state of flux. So It's been quite challenging. So a little bit about our technology stack, and specifically looking through the lens of this idea of a grant management lifecycle, right? I mean, what we do basically fits into these three buckets, right? This pre-award, getting everything prepped up, and then actually doing the award, having to deconflict any broadband serviceable locations that might be in there, scoring these applications, that sort of thing, and then post-award. And this is really where we get into the compliance piece. And if you look at our stack of technologies, it's rather humble, I think. There's not a lot here. In fact, I would argue, all of the offices across the nation have access to these same pieces of software. I will mention, when we get down here to Salesforce, this happens way downstream, right? This is really where we get into the financial piece of administering these grant programs and how we report back out to the federal government. Translation: the worker bees really don't mess with Salesforce. We're really living in GIS land. We're running Pro, we're using field maps and all of the wonderful things that comes along with ArcGIS Online. And James is going to talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. So grant management and GIS. This was an interesting slide for James and I to pull together for the group today, because it forced us to sit down and really think about all of the different ways we have plugged in GIS technologies into our workflow processes, right? And there are a ton. And he's going to go through some of that for you guys, but it starts right up front, which is just identifying where are the areas eligible for funding. And the way that you go about querying that data set from FCC to get down to those point locations that in fact are eligible for funds. And then it gets to be tricky with data license and use agreements that are in place with how and what you can do with that data as far as presenting it in the public domain. So having to get that formatted in a way that allows our applicants to be able to actually get a copy of the BSLs, but then also put something out there in the public domain that anyone, including citizens, can look at and understand, oh, my area is potentially eligible for some funding. This is great news, right? So all of that is playing out in that pre-award phase. We receive questions and things of that nature through Survey 123, publish that right back out as a grid. Our goal really with these processes was to try to streamline them, make them go smooth, and not make it too burdensome to get through this process, because again, we're 4 cycles in. Starting Monday, we'll be launching our 5th grant cycle. And it's just a lot because they're all overlapping now. So processes had to be durable and they had to be repeatable. And I think we've done a really good job given the time constraints that we had to deliver on that. And that's the name of the game, is to do something that doesn't somehow inadvertently require a clawback by the federal government. Nobody wants that, right? So we get to the award. In order to be able to even do an award, you have to deconflict all of these projects. We're using desktop ArcMap to pull that off. And we've got to do all of these quality checks. Do they meet the minimum program requirements? Got to score them. Going through all of this to a point where we finally pick these ones that we really like, get through the curing process, negotiate price. Now we're good to go. Then we have to go through the process of actually combining all of that into a seamless grant agreement that can ultimately be signed or e-signed through Citrix. It's a lot of effort, and I give the team all the credit in the world for just working on this tirelessly. So ultimately, there's going to be a press release. We're going to publish a web map out there. Everyone will be able to see who got the funding, how much it was for, and what's the project period performance, right? We put that all out there in a pop-up in a web app, very easy for folks to be able to go in and understand what's going on. Then we pivot over to the post-award, which is really where we start tracking expenses in progress over time, right? You said you were going to do it in this area, and you give us the fact base that makes it so simple that we've got enough evidence that proves that you did it where you said you were going to do it for the amount that you said you were going to do it. And then part of that also then comes into this federal reporting piece, which is, again, another piece of this puzzle. But this is essentially our process flow that we go through for every grant cycle. And at this point, we're 4 in, about to go number 5. I think we've got a process that feels durable, but time will tell, right? We're always trying to figure out ways to streamline that. So with that, I want to go ahead and pivot over to my colleague, Mr. Tanis, and give him an opportunity to talk a little bit about how we're actually injecting GIS into just about every aspect of our workflow. So James, you ready?
Sure. All right. Good morning, everybody. Okay, so I'm going to go from step one all the way start to finish on how we run a grant round in this office. And really, at the beginning, this was created by Mike and I. It was really a shop of two to run the grant cycles at first. We ran the first one, just the two of us. And then the second one, our first ARPA round, it was really the two of us in the beginning. And then we had two more people come on. So this process I'm going to run you through was really developed in the beginning by Mike and I to make it as lean as possible, try to streamline it where, hey, if it was just going to be the two of us, we could hopefully administer this by ourselves. So first step, and I'm going to show you how we inject GIS into every single step throughout this. Well, we use Survey 123 right off the bat. So to sign up for access to the data, to get grant notifications, we create Survey 123 forms out there, publish them on our website. Anybody who wants access to the data or wants to be notified a grant is coming up needs to fill out these forms, agree to all the legal language in there. And then once the form is filled out, we have all these flows set up through Office 365 on our end, and surveys filled out, hits the flow. We get a notification email saying, hey, somebody has requested access to the data, or somebody wants to sign up for grant notifications. This is great. We don't have to go dig into the survey and see every day who has signed up, and everybody in the office is notified, which is really nice. The grant notification piece, you can see we have a information officer, Hank Page, on here. So this way, as soon as the survey is filled out, even our public information officer knows, and he is notified that, hey, somebody wants access when we publish any information about a grant being launched. Mike, can you go to the next one? All right, so once somebody has requested access to the data, well, here's the data. This is the data that we use for the grants right here. So going back to what Mike was talking about, that FCC broadband map, all those green dots are broadband serviceable locations. So it's what the FCC believes is a location that is serviceable and could receive internet. It either has it or it doesn't. So we have to take those points and present them to an ISP as an eligible location for a grant round. Well, of course, this data is protected. So we have to get the locations, run it through a bunch of SQL scripts to determine, hey, is the location served or unserved? Is the location already funded, or is there any other type of commitment to it? Well, once we have that, we publish a list of these BSLs on Citrix. And again, Citrix is the platform that they have requested access to back on the previous slide through Survey 123. They can download these locations and they know what to apply to. But we also create this eligibility map, since we can't actually publish the individual locations out to the public, since there's a license agreement tied to them. We aggregate it up and we make a map for the public to see, or just even the ISPs if they want to. So it kind of shows, hey, you have unserved areas, you have priority areas, which are just a term for our grant round that you have to choose a priority area first before you can apply to another area on the map. And just a general way for the public to see, hey, this is kind of what's going to be available for funding in that grant round. All right, so this was a big one right here. We started out, we were going to let the ISPs, when they apply, just, hand us back GIS data. And, after sitting down for a little bit, we thought, we better standardize the GIS data coming to us, or else we're just going to get slop or just a bunch of different stuff from every single person that applies. So we came up with a template GIS data set for every applicant, how they need to present the data to us when they apply. So, we came up with a data dictionary, and then we came up with a dictionary for all of the template files we put out there. So like right now, we require the ISPs to present us with the census blocks they want to apply for, the proposed line work, the structures, and any network junctions. And then we require certain fields in these data sets. So what we have done is we've created these template files, either a file geodatabase or just a feature class, and left it empty. And we've asked the ISPs to please fill in these fields when they apply. So this is what we end up with, is a nice standardized data set from every single ISP. So it should be the same thing on every grant application that comes in. All right, so our grant applications. We took a little different approach. So before Mike and I started working here, this office was using fillable PDFs for grant applications. And we were going to head down that path. And it was just a couple weeks before we launched the grant, we decided to pivot off of the fillable PDFs and we transitioned to Excel. So we've created our grant application in kind of like an Excel that looks like a form. So the ISPs fill out this form. Every single cell has to be filled out that is shaded that tan color, and then the yellow ones are optional. And we thought this through very carefully. We decided, hey, once we have the data in Excel, it's easy for us to convert the data any way we want it. We can use formulas, we can chart the data when it comes in, we can graph it, we can quickly score, we can grab certain fields we want. Now the data can easily be joined to any ArcPro document. It just, in the end, instead of trying to strip it from a PDF file, now we have it in Excel and we can manipulate it any way we want. All right, so then once an application is posted out there for an ISP, there's always questions every single time. We thought we get everything fixed for every grant round. We try to improve it, but you know what? There's always questions every single time. So we decided, why not pivot back to Survey 123, because instead of having an ISP or an applicant email us with questions, because everybody emails get lost, we have an ISP fill out a Survey 123 form. Well, again, standardized questions come in, they choose what category they want it to be, they fill out the form. Again, we have a flow in the background. It triggers an email and tells us, hey, a question has been submitted. Well, this is great. Now we can answer the question in an Excel table and then just dump the Excel table to our public information officer who can post it there on the website for everybody to see. So now we have the question submitted to us and an answer for everybody. Okay, so now the next step, once we have the application, the questions, everything answered, and the applications start coming into us. Grant period has closed, application period is closed. Well, at this point, we get all the applications in, we review them, we post all of the GIS data. Well, I shouldn't say all of it. We post the census block GIS data to a web map for the public to see what has been applied for. And this pivots back again to using Excel. So now we were able to take the Excel applications, easily post them to the website, and then also link our web map to those applications. So if somebody wants to click on an area, they'll get a little pop-up, tell you who applied for it, and then they'll see a little link in the pop-up for more info. Well, it takes them automatically to the application that was submitted to us. They can see everything about it and what was applied for. And then from that, we also did, again, a Survey 123 piece, because you have to have a public comment period out there. So if somebody wants to make a comment, they fill out a Survey 123 form. And again, we get notified on the back end that a comment has been submitted, and we take all comments into consideration when scoring and ranking applications. Okay, so now we've hosted all of the applications to the website, public has seen it, comment period has closed. So we start looking at the projects. Well, it's great. We had template GIS data everybody had to use to apply. So we map everybody's project. We look at what they filled out on the application. Now with the template GIS data, we can easily score projects. It's a one-to-one. Everybody should have the line work, the points, the census blocks, and the network junctions in there. So it's great. It makes it easy to evaluate projects and score and pick winners. All right, so once we have scored and picked winners at this point, again, we use GIS all over again. We take all of the winners, we create a map, which you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, and that is baked into the grant agreement. It is actually an exhibit. So the data that they presented to us, that we have deconflicted and accepted their project, create a map, put in their grant agreement. They have to sign it. Also, up above the map, we have a table right there. That's the stats from GIS. So the number of PSLs that they're going to do, the number of them that were residential, the number of them that were businesses, and so forth. The miles of line work, the percentage underground, the percent aerial. So it's just stats that we got in the template GIS data are baked into a table in the grant agreement. So again, we have a map from the data received to us, and then the stats that were in that template GIS data baked into an agreement they have to sign. Okay, so now once the grant agreement is completed, sent out for e-signature, everything is signed, it's time for us to monitor and manage the projects. So this one was a little bit difficult for us. Mike and I came up with this idea. So, we get this nice template GIS data submitted to us. We're going to map it. And then how are we going to actually track that they're doing what they're supposed to do? So we came up with, why not require the ISPs to submit geotag construction photos and geotag speed test photos to us during their quarterly reports? So in their quarterly reports, they have to let us know how many homes did they pass, how many miles of fiber were installed, where do they stand, or where do they believe they stand on the percent complete of the project? Well, we're like, it's time. We should get some geotag construction photos. They drop them to us. We take them, we plot them. Well, do they fall close to the project area? Do they fall in the project area? And are they even photos of construction? So this way we can see now they are actually building in the areas that we funded. And on top of that, we asked for the speed test, and this was a little last minute thing. So with a speed test, we asked them to run a speed test, take a picture of it that is geotagged and hand it to us. Well, this shows us that they're building a fiber network that meets the minimum requirements so it can reach a certain speed. We require all projects, I shouldn't say we do, federal government does, that they need to meet speeds of 100 by 100. So we asked them to submit a speed test to show what they are building actually reaches these speeds. So plot it all. Okay, looks great. All the construction's happening. Speed tests look good and everything. And sometimes we'll decide we should probably go do a site visit too. We'll go look in person and just snap some photos and plot it on the map too. So now we have a nice picture of how the project is looking. All right, so once an ISP reaches out to us and says, hey, our project's complete, we have a project closeout. Again, it's pretty much all GIS right here. We ask the ISPs to submit as-built GIS data. So we know the data that they submit to us during a grant application is not going to be exactly what's built. Stuff can change. Permits might not have happened. Might be a wetland where they couldn't get a permit to cross. Might be a bridge where they decided they can't cross. Railroad track where they can't go under, something like that. So we asked them to submit exactly what was built. Well, the reason for this is we give them that map of what they built. They sign it. So they're certifying this is exactly what we built. In addition to that, the line work should be perfect or almost near perfect. So we verify the amount of miles of fiber in this GIS as-built data to what they charged us for. So I hand the number of miles of fiber to our finance lady upstairs and say, this project said they installed 50 miles of fiber. Are they charging us for 50 miles of fiber? So it's a nice way to check. We also hand them a document, which is a checklist. It's a project closeout checklist, tons of GIS data again. So we ask for all the as-built data. We ask for all the numbers to be played back to us. How many homes did they pass? How many businesses did they pass? How many miles of fiber did they install? How much was above ground, underground, and so forth. So with all of this and the data we have during the monitoring of the project, so like the geotag construction photos, the geotag speed test, we feel confident at this point. Hey, they have built the project to the specifications we have asked for. They have built it where they said they were going to build it. So it's time to pay them at this point. Okay, so that really, in a nutshell, was kind of how we run a grant program from start to finish. It's tweaked a little bit over the 4 we've run, and the 5th we'll be running on Monday. It's worked so far, and I know it will be tweaked every time we go forward. But currently in the broadband office, other than the grant program we're going to be running Monday, is what Mike talked about earlier, this BEAD money, the additional $551 million we're getting. So there's this piece that is coming up in about 2 months from now. It's called a BEAD challenge portal that we had to develop, we had the option of we could either go buy it from a company, we could develop it in-house, or have somebody help us do this. Well, I don't know if we chose the wisest decision, but we decided to build it in-house at this point. So what this challenge portal is, so it's pretty much, if you think back to what Mike presented about the FCC map, it's really a rinse and repeat. We just took what the FCC map was doing and tried to create it on our end using the in-house stack of technology. So this thing is built with Survey 123, Experience Builder, Microsoft Flow, and Microsoft Power Automate. So in a nutshell, it's all of the BSLs on a map that we believe are going to be eligible for BEAD funding, and the ones that we believe are already served, so would not be eligible for funding. Well, you have 3 categories of people/organizations that could submit a challenge on these points to challenge, hey, the point is actually served, not unserved. It shouldn't be available for BEAD funding. Or, hey, the point is actually you're showing it served and we believe it's unserved and we want it available for BEAD funding. Well, you have local governments, nonprofits, or ISPs are the only people that can participate in this challenge. What they do is they click the points on the map and populates over on the left-hand side what we believe is the status of served or unserved. And if it's served, we show, hey, so-and-so ISP says they served this point. You don't think that's true? You click a link and again, pops up a Survey 123 form. This is what we've decided to do. Pre-populates all the information in it through an encoded URL, and then the challenger fills in the information to submit a challenge about it. Next slide, Mike. Okay, so once the form is filled out, next step, it runs through all of these flows right here and spits out in this table right here, all the information about it. So this table, this final table that happens is kind of our determination table. Are we going to accept the challenge or are we not going to accept the challenge? It's been a really complicated, long process for us to develop because, you know, the FCC and NTIA have put a lot of strings on this challenge portal, such as when a challenge comes in, if we accept the challenge, it needs to fire off an email to the ISP so they actually have a chance to rebuttal the challenge. So we just decided, you know, best way to do this, again, incorporate an experience builder through ArcGIS Online, bring it into Survey 123 and Flow, and just kind of have all of this automation happen on the back end. All right, Mike, I'll let you pick it up here.
Yeah, no, and I do see we're late on the on our time, so I'll go real quick here. From a staffing perspective, the way that we structured this particular program or these set of programs, these grant cycles, you really have to know GIS, right? I'm not sure that we could ever bring someone in that didn't have some GIS background and expect that they would succeed based on the workflows that we've established here. That's a big so what. So for staffing, what we've really been focusing on is let's get somebody that knows GIS, even if it's just from, you know, college or a certificate program, and we'll teach them the other aspects or whatever's necessary in order to be able to administer these grant programs to be part of the team. That's a big so what. Versioning consistently dogs us out, right? I mean, it just does. And all 50 states, including US territories, are dealing with this because that FCC map changes twice a year. Now it's gotten better, but when you're tracking progress towards, you know, homes and businesses that have been connected and the denominator continues to change because homes are coming on and homes are going off, it wreaks a little bit of havoc from a contractual perspective and how you deal with that. We've got policies in place to deal with that now with our grant programs, but it consistently is something that we have to worry about. Crowdsourced speed test data. Look, it's another tool in the toolbox. There's a lot of buzz about leveraging speed test data from, crowdsourced, right? Crowdsourced data. But the reality is, near as we can tell, it's still just a nice to have. In other words, nothing comes off of the table because you're using crowdsourced speed data, right? And that's a bit of a challenge or a barrier, you know, from our perspective. Nothing we can really do about that. We like having that data because it gives us more confidence that sure enough, yeah, this is like independent verification that, the work happened where it was supposed to happen and when it was supposed to happen. But again, nothing from a federal perspective comes off the table because you're using that data. Data use restrictions, this again is another big challenge. There is a license agreement between all 50 states and US territories and CostQuest in order to be able to use the FCC fabric, right? That data set. There's things you can do and there's things that you can't do. And that then in turn wreaks havoc from a transparency perspective. And I'll let you pick it up from there. James, go ahead.
Sure. So then, well, also we get into publishing the data. So you can see our maps over here on the right-hand side. Can't just publish anything. Couldn't publish the points because we got a license attached to them and so forth. So we have to aggregate the data. And the best way to do this is just aggregate it to some type of census geography. So we stuck with census blocks, which was the old way people used to have to report to the FCC. So presenting it to the public, our top map shows kind of, hey, this, we call it areas of need, where the state stands as of that date. So this map is a March 31st, 2023. This is where the state stands as of that date. So green, good. Everything's served there. The other colors are just the number of residential locations we believe, based on the BSL fabric, that are left unserved in that areas of that date. Not to say we haven't attached funding to those, just currently where it stands. The map below, the planning map, well, that shows after funding, where we believe the state will look in the future. So our first ARPA grant program is going to wrap up the ones we awarded December 31st, 2024. It was a 2-year build that we offered in that grant program. So you can see everything we funded. That is what the state will look like after that grant program wraps up in about 10 months. Well, then we get to this web application and maintenance. Well, like Mike mentioned earlier, SC Digital Drive, it was before we launched our first grant program. It was great. We were super excited to launch the hub site and everything. Now we kind of regret it. It's a lot to maintain. It goes stale quickly. The grant program, what I presented earlier from start to finish, we thought it was going to be smooth and easy. Come to find out, it takes a lot. Even with 4 of us cranking on it all the time, to run a grant program from start to finish takes us anywhere from 10 months to a year. We've tried to cut it down and it just never happens. It consistently always takes about that amount of time. Well, then overcommitting. That's a big one right there. We don't want to present to these ISPs, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to launch another grant program in a couple of weeks. Hey, we're going to have this done in a certain amount of time. It's a less is more approach for us around here. We learned in the end, give them a lot less and then surprise them with a lot more at the end. It takes a lot to launch a grant program from start to finish and feel confident at the end that you could pay these people that the work was done. Don't want to ever just rubber stamp it and say, hey, we're good, pay them. Got to feel good and got to be able to prove it at the very end that actually the work was done and the money was spent wisely.
You nailed it, James. And with that, I want to give a big shout out to my team, James, the rest of the crew. Would not be able to do what we're doing without them. And I want to thank everyone. I apologize we went long. James and I are happy to stay as long as anyone would like us to talk. And with that, I want to pitch it back to you, Adam. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I don't know about everybody else. My mind was like blown. I did not know that you guys were doing that much technology was involved. I just don't get an opportunity to hang out with you guys as much as I need to. With that being said, again, thank you guys very much for doing this. I got a couple of questions. One's going to come from Jackie Reeder. Her first question is, for your challenge portal, were you able to create that out of the box with Experience Builder on AGOL, or did you have to use some developer edition? And is it hosted on AGOL or is it on a web server?
So we don't use enterprise here. All our IT services are contracted out through another state agency called DTO, the Department of Technology. So no web server, everything is out of the box, AGOL. I mean, and my Office 365. Somehow we got it to work all the way through that from start to finish. I can't say it's going to work perfectly. We haven't launched it yet. There's probably going to be some bugs that happen in it, but we presented our idea to Esri in a flow chart, and they gave us thumbs up. Yeah, sounds great. Looks like it's going to work.
Jackie's actually got a couple more questions in here. Also regarding the FCC map, did your broadband office submit any bulk challenges, or would you say the map was fairly accurate for your state or for our state?
We challenged hard the first 2 times. I believe we've probably submitted close to 160,000 challenges, we've never challenged removing points. We've only challenged adding points or changing the data behind the scenes. So changing the attributes like the addresses or the building count or so forth. Really say bulk of our challenges up front were adding points, and then we switch to towards the end, changing the attributes, changing the address and trying to get it corrected. We worked with Adam actually on that to try to pivot the FCC address to match the E911 address point records address. And, long story short, it kicked us in the butt in the end. It was not the best move.
Always a challenge, right?
Yeah.
I'll get to Jackie's next question here in a second. But how did you, so this one came from Shay. How did you determine if a DSL is served or not served? That's a great question, right?
Yeah. So what Mike talked about earlier, so that BDC submission where the ISPs have to report to the federal government twice a year. So what we've done is we also make the ISPs report the data after they upload it to the FCC's website twice a year. That same day, they need to dump that data on a Citrix folder, which they use Survey 123 to get access to. The exact same data they gave the FCC, they need to give to us. So we look at it, we combine it, and stack it all together. And, our broadband office might be a little bit different than some of the other broadband offices throughout the United States. We consider technologies such as DSL and fixed wireless for ARPA only as unserved. So we take any BSL that doesn't have a fiber or cable ISP reporting to it, and we say it is unserved.
Yeah, and just for context, I did just drop in the chat a link to a document. It's a white paper on DSL, and when it reaches, we feel it's reached end of life. This article kind of speaks to that as well. And of course, it's going to be different depending on which program you're looking at. This was a decision that we made consciously here in the state to consider DSL end of life and therefore unserved. But when you start to talk about what you're doing in BEAD, it changes, right? The way that you go about doing that. The federal government, NTIA, they look at DSL as underserved, not unserved. So there's all kinds of nuances like that across the board with every one of these grant programs.
To clarify it a little bit better, so I know one way maybe we're a little bit different than any other broadband office is we didn't for the longest, and we still really don't yet, we don't look at speed. We look at the technology code. So like I mentioned earlier, if it doesn't have fiber or cable, we consider it unserved at that point. That way, you got some ISPs out there reporting some crazy speeds that no way DSL could reach or fixed wireless. So, instead of trying to evaluate something at a speed threshold, you don't know if it's true or not, just automatically only look at technology code.
You guys mentioned, and again, I think this is more up your alley, James, you mentioned using field maps. Is that what you use to manage the required geotagging photos during construction, or how is the field maps actually used?
So we
So-
thought about using field maps with our grantees, but no one liked the idea of playing help desk to, I don't know what, dozen and a half different, ISPs. We use field maps specifically for our efforts to go out and conduct site visits, right? So that's just for us to go out there and do our thing. And it's just lightweight form, allows you to obviously go and link in geotag photos, and that's it there. We wanted to make it simple for ISPs. It took enough just to get everybody to turn on location services to their phone to be able to actually make sure the lat long was part of the photo, right? It was in the header of the photo. And then they ran into issues actually getting the photo to us, because if they just emailed it off their phone, it would strip the lat long, right? So some education and outreach had to go into just getting that basic level of an understanding down. And at this point, they've all got it down. They got it, they get it, they know why we're doing it, and it saves time, energy, and money.
Did the team look at any packaged software solutions for the challenge portal? Our team, so this comes from Kevin Hoffman, our team is looking into a product, ready.net, but wondering if you explored anything like that, and if you found any limitations. It sounds like most of what you did was built in-house.
Yeah, we decided, I think right at the very beginning, we were just going to go in-house at this point. We just thought, it would be easier. We could develop something where we don't have to require challengers to have a CostQuest license, because we'll be able to hide everything behind the scenes and nobody will be able to see anything. And then this way, all the data stays in our office. So there could never be an issue of something getting out that shouldn't happen.
I mean, I have had a chance to see the demo on ready.net, and there are a lot of states that are using it. And I have no opinion or preference either way to say that that's a great solution or it's not a great solution. But I will say, just, Captain Obvious, the more states that jump on the bandwagon, the greater likelihood that whatever they do is going to work, because, right, they've got, the federal government's got a vested interest in making sure that that process, whatever's in that framework, in fact, will translate and get you through this BEAD challenge process. And this is a big worry for broadband offices across the nation, how they're going to do what they're going to do. And I'm sure that they'll, ready.net will have this mastered by the time the BEAD challenge process rolls around.
So this is an interest. Shay brings up another question. Sounds like you guys have a great relationship with the ISPs. How did you make that happen?
Well, so I can't remember if it exactly is worded this way or if it's actually in the proviso, but I know. So one of the things that we did is, we got some blowback at the very beginning before Mike and I started here. I was actually doing some work when I worked in the same office as Adam. ORS had a contract with that office to do broadband work. And just getting the data from the ISPs was a little bit difficult. So I believe it was written in the proviso, you could tell me if I'm wrong, Mike, that they had to give the data to us every 6 months when they presented it to the FCC to be able to be able to participate in one of the grant rounds. So, kind of built the relationship that way, like, hey, hand us the data, we'll get you in the grant. Then we've worked with them. We've hosted, I don't know, at least 2 webinars with all of them for every grant round. We've had open communications with them constantly. We've told them, anytime you need help, reach out to us, we'll help them. The FCC, halfway through one of our very first grant rounds, switched from going to census blocks to that point location and everything. Well, that was a huge problem right there. And we went through at least 4 or 5 calls with almost every ISP, helping them like, hey, you should submit your data this way to make it the cleanest, to actually show the points you serve and that you don't serve. Just working with them one-on-one, always having the open communication and everything. And it seems to have built great relationships with them that way.
I think just building on that real quick, the proviso also included a provision that stated that the data that they give us, we can use, but it's not discoverable. In other words, they didn't have to necessarily worry about the information that they would give us would be subject to a Freedom of Information Act request, right? That I think gave some confidence that, okay, well, they're not going to just give out trade secrets, right? They're going to control that data and how they use it. Want to give James and the rest of the team a big shout out too for just actually looking at the data, right? So at the same time they submit to the FCC and they get their little certificate that they submitted it, they send the same thing to us. Well, guess what? We looked at the data. The team took the time to plot that data and compare that relative to what they had submitted previously. And when things didn't make sense, somebody picked up the phone and had a phone call. Hey, we're looking, the way you've attributed this isn't right. Your entire network is fiber, but the last submission showed that it was a combination of fiber and DSL and everything else. So what gives? Did you really get all that work done? Or, that sort of thing. So we ended up kind of inherently providing a level of quality control they weren't otherwise going to get. And I think that was useful to them. I think they appreciate what that meant because, there's teeth attached to lying to the federal government, as I'm sure we all know. So they want to get it right, and we have to have it right if we're going to use this as a basis of making hundreds of millions of dollars worth of investments. So there really wasn't any corners that we could cut there.
In addition to that too, we do meet with every single ISP that actually has a current grant with us right now, every single month, where they present us on the status of their project. So instead of just getting an update during their quarterly reports, every single month we meet with them for 30 minutes, hour, whatever they want to do, 5 minutes. I mean, they just tell us, hey, this is kind of where the project stands. And we ask them right up front, this is time to just let us know, is there any issues, any concerns, anything you just need to let us know about. And this way, nothing bubbles up at the end, everybody's happy, and we can kind of work through any issue that's popping up quickly and keep everybody happy.
Well, and let us not forget, we've got project management guys tied to every single project that we fund, and we're up to about 100 projects that we've funded, just shy of about $400 million. So every single project includes a log file, and every single time we meet with them, even if it's rainbows and lollipops and popsicles for everybody, we write it down. So it's going to look a little sideways if he told us all this time in the last 3 months, everything was great. And then we see the quarterly report where the sky is falling, right? So these are the kinds of controls we have in place to just verify the honest people are doing honest things. And everybody knows it. We've given a copy of the project management guide. We give a copy of our log file. So we try to maintain that level of transparency with our grantee at all times. So they know what's going on. We know what's going on. And when things come up, because they always do, we're in a position to say, okay, we're really glad you told us. Now let's figure out how we're going to solve this problem.
Well, guys, we have about 1 minute left. If we can make this really fast, we got one more question I think we'll roll through. Are you having ISPs pick their own project areas for the BEAD funding, or are you doing a prepackaged or bundled ahead of time?
So our initial proposal, volume 2, has not been approved yet, but we just put out kind of where we stand on it yesterday on our website. We are choosing the project areas, and we decided to move to census ZCTAs. That way we have a predefined project area. It's easy to score. Everything is 1-to-1 at that point. And we thought moving to that geography would be great because you have census data aggregated to that level of geography.
Awesome. Thank you guys very, very much. I'm sure there will be some additional information coming out from this. Everybody, thank you all very much for joining. And if you all have any other questions, feel free to submit them through the NSGIC forums and we will get them out to the guys. Thanks, everyone.